do 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 do. Hello, hello.
Good morning. Hello. Happy Friday. Welcome to B2B Power Hour.
Nice to see you again, Morgan. You loved my theme music, hey?
You
Brought
as
the
well,
energy
Nick.
up so much.
Oh, yeah. In case anybody missed it, because we're not entirely sure when some of the streams go live, Nick was starting to sing the Jeopardy theme as we were waiting for all the streams to connect. And really, I feel pumped, ready to answer questions.
Well, I thought it was fitting to go and start with the Jeopardy theme song because you said you're going to have one hell of a story to start us out
Oh,
with,
yeah. Yeah.
and some questions to follow suit. So I don't know. Should we go and build the anticipation, or should you just launch into this story so we can go and see what questions you're going to go and kill me with? I mean, you're going to go and test me with later.
Let's definitely build the anticipation. The topic for today, of course, rebuilding the marketing team for modern B2B sales. This is mostly prompted from this story I have, a conversation I had a couple weeks ago. And over the past couple of weeks, what I've seen out on LinkedIn and elsewhere on the internet is sort of this emergent conversation, this bubbling up of what does it mean to have a new marketing team? What are the new hiring profiles that you need? What are the new skills marketers need? And how are organizations built right now, marketing organizations, marketing teams built right now, that is doing all of these companies a disservice because of all of the new trends and all the new competition and all of the new demands on marketers? How is their mismatch? So that's what the prompt was for today. And now that I've built enough anticipation, I can get into the story.
Okay.
I was brought in to chat with the marketing director at this startup. And it's an interesting, they're sort of corporate owned. It's one of those setups where they've already been acquired and the corporation is scaling them. So they already have a decent sales team, but she's basically the only marketing person on staff, which is a very usual setup. You know, you have a lot of salespeople and one marketing person in-house. And she finally got budget and realized that she had a lot of challenges about who to hire and what to hire. And so we had a conversation about this. And what she posed to me was perhaps the most interesting hiring question I've heard in the last year. And she wanted someone who could do basically 3 or 4 different things. One was set up automations inside the CRM with the rest of their technology. Mm-hmm. The second was write and set up a cadence for email marketing to their existing clients. Very infrequent. It's like once a month kind of thing that they're actually sending something of value to their existing clients. Okay. The third was to run analysis and data analysis inside their CRM on all of their campaigns, as well as on their salespeople to help understand sort of the customer lifecycle, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly was sort of to integrate and have this 360 view of how all of their marketing campaigns worked with their sales cycle. So we had this very good conversation because I realized that if you went out and tried to post this in the marketplace as, let's say, an automation specialist, you probably wouldn't be able to find someone who has those email content skills. Mm-hmm. And if you posted it as an analyst position, you might find somebody who has good writing skills, but maybe not the chops to understand the automation side or the sales cycle side. And yet, and this is what was confounding to me, this is an incredibly valuable position to a company because somebody who can sit in the center at a 360 view and understand sort of the technical layer of everything that's going on, and also the back end of the life cycle, how they're supporting their existing customers, can be a linchpin of a marketing team, right? And yet we went and perused all sorts of job postings out in the world. There's not really a template for this. There's not a template for a position like that. And the first conversation that we had, and I think you'd enjoy this, Nick, was, are we actually hiring like 4 people in one position? Are we making a mistake and are they going to be overburdened? And we came to the realization that that's also not necessarily true. Like an automation specialist is probably not, this person would not be doing automations all the time. And similarly, it's not like they have to write email content for all their outbound and visibility work, as well as for their existing customers, et cetera. It's just like a once a month thing, and they understand how to set it up in the customer lifecycle. So we actually arrived at this position called a customer lifecycle manager, which who knows? But it was a really good example, a good prompt for this topic this week of there's this emergent need in different companies because of the technology that exists, because of the new playbooks that exist, especially around demand generation and inbound, that the hiring profile for marketing staff and marketing teams probably needs to change. And it probably needs to change fundamentally. So yes, that was the story, Nick.
Yeah. How many? And I just want to start with saying good morning, Aaron. Good morning, Nelson. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Good morning, guys.
The marketing, it just kills me every time I go. And I don't know, LinkedIn always likes to go and throw it out there. Like so-and-so is hiring. And you look at the job. And I always like to know. And it's partly because of this, because we're trying to learn and we're trying to understand what the modern marketing team looks like. What's the makeup? And you read these descriptions, you're like, wow, that sounds like 7 different jobs at like barely minimum wage.
Yep.
And I'm thinking of like, so what procedures drive that? What's the routine that you would actually work through? What are your core activities, or as we've recently been looking at, Morgan Brock's, that would drive it forward? And you're like, that would be so incoherent and spread across so many different things. How are you ever supposed to get good fast? And then you're thinking of that and how it then relates to sales. So whose responsibility is it to then qualify, and how is that handoff? And then you're thinking, well, maybe this is why marketing gets a bad rep. One of the reasons.
And I think you're touching on a really interesting question, which is if you're not hiring marketing specialists, where somebody's deeply specialized in content creation, email campaigns, automation, et cetera, and you're hiring maybe marketing generalists or people who have skills in multiple different areas, how does that change the incentives, the metrics, the formulas, the processes that companies use to drive a marketing team? Because so I think about this a lot because I was in the agency world for a little while. And before that, obviously, I had a web design practice. So I've sort of seen various formulations of companies as an external partner and an internal partner as to how they hire. And I think the first mistake that companies make in hiring is they try and build an in-house agency. And what happens at an external agency is that agency hires specialists. They hire an email content specialist, or they hire a PPC ad campaign specialist. And that ad campaign specialist runs ad campaigns for like 12 to 15 different clients. Or, I mean, maybe less, maybe more, it really depends on the agency. But basically, they are handling multiple different accounts. And sorry, just to interrupt, I liked the gentle movement up for all of our video watchers on this. Nick was adjusting his viewport. Anyways, that they sort of replicate this agency model internally. The problem is when you hire a specialist, let's say an ad campaign specialist, at an agency, they have 6 different clients to manage in a week, let's say. And in-house, they have 1 client. And so it creates this space, and I see this happen all the time, where a very talented specialist will come in and say, oh, I can do so much for you, which is good, right? You want that. And then they maybe get stuck in gear and it goes overdrive. And suddenly you're running, 4 or 5 different marketing campaigns, but basically only based on the specialist skills you have on staff, instead of asking the strategic question of what should we actually be doing to generate demand in the marketplace, to gain visibility, and then hiring for that. And hiring these sort of generalist positions that have fingers in multiple pies and are like technically savvy enough, but not necessarily a specialist. And I think this is a huge challenge right now in the marketing industry. I went and looked at my alma mater's marketing degree program because I was really interested to see I didn't get a degree in marketing, but I was interested to see what they were sort of churning out in the world. And they're basically churning out people who are technically adept at running corporate marketing campaigns, which is fine. You're getting a college degree, whatever. But the focus of the coursework is really on tactical tools. How do you run Facebook ads? And how do you do marketing planning? All of this sort of like organizational questions. And very little emphasis on these fundamental skills that I believe, and I know you believe too, Nick, marketers should have. Like, how do you see clearly? How do you do customer interviews? How do you understand the market? Certainly, empathy is sort of this umbrella of an umbrella term for a bunch of different skills, but basically the ability to relate to others, to see their worldview, and then being able to match or interrupt that worldview in a marketing campaign. There's like one class on like consumer behavior, and I'm sure it's like corporate case studies, but that's not being taught. And so we have this. Now let's get really big here. I can't say meta anymore because of Facebook's rebrand. So let's get really big here and think there's this big pipeline in the industry from college graduates who have marketing degrees all the way to experienced folks. And basically the pipeline is you become specialized when you first graduate. So you become really good at, running social media or whatever. And then over time, because you get promoted, you get maybe a little more generalized and a little bit more strategic. And so you go from, an ad designer to a creative director over the course of your career. But that's the agency model. That doesn't serve businesses, right? Your business actually needs generalists. Your business actually just needs generalists, people who are able to dip their toes in multiple different pies and work in concert with each other without having to hire You can outsource specialists. That's not the problem. Your team needs to be incredibly adept at multiple different things in order to compete in the modern digital environment, in order to generate demand. And we can dive into this, but I feel like I've sort of ranted for a little bit, and I'm sure you have a question.
Let me fix that, Kurt. Now I have a voice. Best practices rule the world.
Mm-hmm.
Best practices were created when? Nobody ever asks. And that's the biggest problem that I'm seeing is so many companies are building around best practices instead of looking at what's working for their audience. And this goes back to the reason why a lot of marketing and sales teams are struggling is because they actually don't know their audience and they made way too many assumptions. And so we look at the actual core strategy that they're running for their marketing and sales and their go-to-market, and there isn't one.
Right.
They're just running routines. They're just running, we're going to go and do a little bit of social. We're going to throw a little bit of the ad spend in there and maybe do a little bit of SEO. And, there's probably a few other things we could do, but we're, our omni-channel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Omni-channel program is going to go and save us from everything. And
right.
But as a sales professional, we've always had to work accounts. And accounts, we have territories, or there's always like I'd say a method to the madness, but not always. Mm-hmm. There should be a method to the madness where it's designed with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice that as marketing got better and the tools got better and the information got better, that never reflected. And so too many times when we talk about like where sales and marketing going, it's lost because nobody's actually taking that head on and being the general to go and give guidance. So it doesn't even matter about being a generalist. Like you can still be a specialist if you've identified a key area like content creation that is driving the business forward. So you hire one content creator that's, your go-to. Well, that could be a really good investment if based on what's going on in your business, you've identified that as a main lever that you want to pull for this next quarter, this next year. That's where it makes sense. But we're not going into that depth. We're not asking the right questions that get us to that point. Like if I said, most of the people you're talking to, do you believe in their strategy that they're rolling out?
No. At a basic level, no, I don't. And I see it too often. And these are extremely well-equipped sales and marketing teams. They have all the right people, more or less. It's just they don't have the right direction or the right method, as you said. They're following old best practices, Yeah.
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 When we talk about rebuilding the marketing team, the biggest thing that we're rebuilding is we're setting best practices to the side until they're identified as the best moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to go and see more marketing companies really test their assumptions of what they know about their customer base, how they talk, what motivates them, get really to the core, and then look at how they're making buying decisions. And, if you look at how people buy, you can change the way you sell. And also the way that in which they're consuming information or educating themselves, because a lot of that's being done without being in front of us. And most buyers prefer not to. And in some cases, it's actually a disadvantage to get in front of them too early because now you're playing telephone.
Right. And I think hiring fundamentally is a reflection of your business strategy.
Yes.
So if you think that SEO is the way you're going to generate leads and interest in the marketplace by targeting long tail content keywords and writing the biggest knowledge base you've ever seen in order to get traffic, in order to get a percentage of that traffic to sign up for a white paper and then spam them to death or basically cold call them to death as a result of them downloading that white paper, that's the old MQL playbook. You are going to hire an SEO strategist, a content writer, and SDRs that are tasked with following up on these cold leads. And I know Nelson's joined us in chat today, and he's wrote an excellent book called The Death of the SDR, which I thoroughly enjoyed and puts to bed like this doesn't work anymore. And this is what you and I are both seeing in the marketplace, that nowadays that people do not follow a linear buying process. They may never have, and maybe we had a short period of time in which that was the exception when people were fairly linear, and in general they're more circular or complex. But right now it's complicated. People will visit a site and read your content, educate themselves on your product. And so by the time that they reach out to you, they're ready to buy. And if you have all of your strategy rested on the decision that when they reach out to us, we still have to educate them in the sales process, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And that comes back to what you were saying that I really like, which is it's not a good idea to follow best practices if it's not working for you. And the way I know it's not working for you is you have high staff turnover, you have cash flow issues, you're not hitting revenue targets, right? All of these fundamentals of your business that should be working in concert aren't. And we need to restructure a marketing team to support that. But at a really fundamental level, that requires a repositioning, a realignment even around marketing objectives for the organization. And I think that starts with saying MQLs are no longer our goal. But that's a real foundation. Like not capturing names and emails, a lot of people cannot capture names and emails. What's actually required in a demand generation playbook that we advocate for is a thorough and strategic play to get visibility and attention in the marketplace by repurposing owned assets, taking a podcast a company runs, taking a little audiogram and publishing it out on a different social network, or taking highlights from the episode and sending it to your existing customers because maybe you've positioned a play around retention and growth. Like all of your marketing decisions are a reflection of your fundamental business strategy, or well, they should be. And when you're simply following best practices, you are creating a fundamental business strategy incidentally. And that is going to create certain results. And in fact, I see too often it creates poor results because you're playing by 2009 rules or 2012 rules in 2021 or 2022, when today it requires an entirely different strategy. And if you start with that strategy, then you can start to hire people who fit that, like this marketing director I had mentioned at the beginning. She realized her strategic decision was, we don't need to do X, Y, and Z. What we really need to be good at is B. And B is a customer lifecycle approach for our technology. So I need to hire for that. That is a strategic decision. And if we start by saying, how do we generate revenue? And how do we have sales and marketing work together and generate revenue as a cohesive team, and make sure that the strategic decisions are driving hiring practices, and most importantly, the hiring profiles that you are putting out into the world. Like you, I search job descriptions all the time. I'm like, let's see what's actually people are hiring for. And again, it's this old hiring profile. Somebody who can analyze data from all of these ad networks, because that's what I think of Google and Facebook as anymore. They're ad networks. People who can understand SEO, people who can drive A/B tests. Like A/B testing is 2011, maybe. And yeah, A/B testing, I guess, can still work, but it's so expensive to now anymore. And also, A/B testing belies the fact, in my opinion, you're not actually talking to your customers. Because if you actually know your customers, you don't have to run A/B tests. You just run your campaigns, and
How
there's
many
still
people
experimentation.
you think talk
But
about A/B testing? That's how people hire. They don't actually do any strategy, and they're hoping somebody's going to figure out, kind of like Tara was hinting at. They're going to go and find out that best practice that works in the process, but they're using old best practices that were trial. They were used in a different time, in a different market, in a different use case. And so what I see a lot in job descriptions is they have no strategy, so there's no workflow. They
mhm.
don't know what's in it for the customer, why they're doing it, and then they're judging it on metrics that don't align. So not
Oh,
only is there no strategy, but their whole motivation is misaligned. And this we see this a lot in sales, and this is what gives sales a bad reputation is when poor commission structures, comp structures don't align with the company, it gives the salesperson a different initiative. And when they're not paid very well, they also are in survival mode.
mhm.
So if your marketing is essentially in survival mode, just like a commission salesperson, how is that for the better good of a customer? How are they going to step into their shoes and create, that bifurcation that, oh my God, they wrote this just for me. They get me. They're going to be all over the place because all they want is visibility. All they want is to go and get more engagement. They don't look by who. They're not cherry picking those leads. They're not looking who's ready to talk or who's approachable or doing all these different things. And so we're just defaulting to vanity metrics. And that could be how many calls a day you're making, how many emails you're doing. Don't get me wrong. They're all useful tactics. But if
Mhm.
your best practices falls on arbitrary numbers, you didn't actually have a strategy that it aligns with to make it make sense. Kind of like what we were talking with the LinkedIn strategy. And so we need to tear companies down, throw away all of those metrics and all of the things like the assumed pieces, and
Mhm.
really question, how does this drive the business forward? How is this the growth engine in which your business grows on? So not only are you getting the right customers that are profitable and you are uniquely qualified to help, but also doing that sustainably in the future.
Right. I think it's a huge assumption that optimizing for, or it's a good example of an assumption, even though it's sort of been revealed. It was a huge assumption that optimizing for MQLs led to a better sales process, right? That getting names and emails means, and then it creates this cadence inside the organization that sales needs to hit X number of calls or emails a day to these unqualified MQLs in order to qualify them into what, well, it could be an
They
SQL, an
used to
SQO,
work.
or whatever. And right, that's it's so funny in this
Five
current environment. They're
five
like,
to 10 years ago, they worked because that's how
uh-huh,
people were researching. As they got to a certain
yes,
point, companies put up gates
mm-hmm,
in which the salesperson was there to go and fill in the gap. Originally, we didn't have this luxury of information through the internet. And it was either you read it through print,
mm-hmm,
whether it was a newspaper or however you were getting, or a library, or the salesperson was knocking at your door, or somebody referred them when you were at the barber shop or or a pub.
mm-hmm.
Like that was how the information was passed. That is not how it is now. But yet I watch a lot of companies that are setting up their entire infrastructure around how we used to communicate 20, 30 years ago. And now we're moving into like digital channels.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this can't be tracked, or even the way that we want to behave with each other because of past interactions and COVID. Let's face it, COVID did change everything going forward. People want to take their time. They want to go and feel comfortable making a decision, and they want to go and seek out credible sources, which is both from referrals and from just networking. But where do you see this happening? Where
Yeah.
is this? Do you see this in job descriptions? No.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any job descriptions that you feel like they've actually went and related to a strategy? No, but that's on sales and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes this growing disconnect between the sales and marketing departments, which is then doing a disservice because they're not following up with leads fast enough because they don't realize the importance. They're also not starting that conversation in a way that's meaningful. If you have somebody that's super high intent, super excited to talk to you, and then you throw them to an SDR to go and qualify them, you lost the sale because you
Yep.
missed the point.
Yep.
It's like all the relationship metrics. If I, like when we talk about connecting on LinkedIn, if I say thank you for connecting and you don't say anything back to me, you're probably not open to talking to me.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what would a sales organization tell you to do?
Keep on pressuring them. Keep on talking to them.
Because they don't know that customer and they've never considered how to do this in a way that's natural and makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I do think you're also touching upon how marketing enables a lot of that behavior as well, which is marketers aren't actually that good at marketing. And I don't mean that as like a blanket statement or something wrong with the industry, but a lot of marketing is really digital sales, right? So a good chunk of the way marketing actually plays out is a digital sales playbook. You're automating a lot of it from the marketing angle, from the standard marketing team, and then you're letting sales pick up some of the other stuff. And then there's like this small slice, like 20%, 10% or so, that is actual, in my view, actually really good marketing. And that is, well, there's so many terms now for it. I learned it as brand marketing. And like direct marketing, of course, is marketing, but in the modern digital environment, direct marketing is really just digital sales. And brand marketing is the inherently immeasurable. It's the dark funnel. It's the dark social. It is the stuff you're actually putting out into the world to change people's minds about your brand, to raise visibility of your brand, to get people to know about it, to get people excited about it, to inform, engage, excite, inspire. You can pull the whole word cloud. Just search LinkedIn and you'll be able to find out all of the terms that people use to describe this kind of marketing. And when marketers don't do that well, when marketers aren't creating visibility in the marketplace for the brand from like a demand generation playbook, that's another term for this sort of idea. I know we need to have like a whole little notepad of a glossary index for the episode. A demand generation playbook is literally generating demand out in the world. And the way you do that is through excellent marketing. It's literally creating visibility for your company. It is generating demand with the customers that you want to buy from you.
Point. That is the part that's missed.
Yes.
The customers that you want based on your research and development that led you to this point. So even when
it's not just a shotgun, right? You're not just like, oh, let's see who this attracts kind of thing.
Like, are you talking to ops? Are you talking to finance?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is this coming to be? Question for you.
Yes.
Should salespeople be required to do more marketing?
Ooh, very interesting.
And who would they report to for it? What
do you mean by marketing in this sense?
So to me, anything where you're delaying that transaction and not delaying it on purpose, but it's relationship focus, I would deem more marketing than sales because you're focusing more on education and you're slowing down the process. So let's say content creation. So for me, technically I'm a sales professional, but I create all the marketing through this content with you, like what we do. So does that make me sales gone marketing? Or is it just marketing gone wild? I
see, and this is marketing gone wild. Oh, geez. This is why I feel like that distinction just isn't that useful anymore. Like there's yes, sales and marketing are distinct functions, but in our modern world, the lines are blurred heavily between what we could call marketing and what we could call sales. I think there is an aspect to marketing around demand generation, or basically around brand marketing, which I would say is, almost exclusively marketing. And then I think there's some stuff around sales that is exclusively sales, especially the account executive role and a lot of like the closing, the navigating, the customer success sort of function. Those things are very much distinct. But today, because a salesperson can post out on LinkedIn and have a content strategy around connection and relationship building and cultivation and sort of a blend of demand gen, or at least content creation and ABM or ABX, some sort of strategy there. Is that marketing? Is that sales? Because obviously it's promoting the company, and to the right audience, this salesperson is sort of a lever from the marketing team in order to get the brand out in the world. But at a functional level, it's still a salesperson, however that works. And I think, to me, this calls forth the question of like, what does a future team look like for a B2B company? And obviously, I talk a lot about, and you and I have discussed extensively, the revenue organization and the RevOps perspective, in which there's, in my view, really a revenue team. And this comes back to some of the not cross-functional teams, which is the hot topic of the day. How do we create cross-functional teams? It's cross-functional roles. It's like that customer lifecycle manager at the very beginning. It's somebody who's sitting in different areas of these traditional silos and seeing the 360-degree perspective, or 200 and whatever degree perspective that they get of the revenue generation. And that comes from outbound, inbound, closing the sale, retention and growth, the whole life cycle of the customer with the company. Those cross-functional roles, I think, are more important in this modern world than they used to be. And that's where I would think of this modern salesperson as somewhat cross-functional. Are they doing marketing? Sure. Are they doing sales? Sure. And I think the more leaders can become comfortable with that blend in roles, the more that we can create metrics that incentivize that and fund roles. We were going to get there, and incentivize that kind of behavior, the better off these organizations are going to be. And I mean, metrics is the great example.
Every SDR tells me the reason why they can't create content or AEs is because they don't have time. Why don't they have time? Because they have vanity metrics that are put upon them to show that they're busy, not productive. Productive doesn't count. And it's only until they get highly productive in terms of results are they allowed the freedom to try things at work.
Which is such a shame.
It's backwards.
Oh, totally backwards.
So if you look at your best agent and you're looking at what they're doing and you reverse engineer it and you use that as your best practice or your standard of excellence, how would that change everything going forward? Well, now you're training on something that's real and not something that's living in a book. Because I've read a couple books in sales and they're like, that sounds great in theory, but you probably never sold anything in your entire life. And it's just tough. It's like, I think more salespeople should go out and market. I think more marketing should go out and sell. Mm-hmm. And then have an appreciation. And I think leadership, if they've never done these activities and they don't have that strategic mindset, are doing the whole organization a disservice by pretending that they do and writing these guidelines and creating these strategies and doing these rollouts that they're way too tactical before they need to be. Because how much money is being wasted in this process? And so we really just have to tear it down to the ground and stop. And I don't know if that's going to be new titles. I honestly don't think it matters, but it's definitely going to be a new mentality towards going to business. So if I reach out to you, Morgan, my prerogative shouldn't be just to sell you within a certain amount of conversations. Right. That's typically how it's graded. Mm-hmm. My success as a salesperson is how quickly I can convert you to something that's paying. Mm-hmm. And same with marketing. Mm-hmm. It's your conversion metrics. Mm-hmm. And so how can we make this more relationship driven and talking about, you don't even have to say brand, but like intangible assets, where if I call you out of the blue and I say, hey, I work for B2B Power Hour and you know who I am, it has an incredible value, but people don't put that into consideration, like Apple. You know, right. If I name drop Apple, you know who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you're pointing to, I agree. I don't think titles necessarily matter, but I do think roles and responsibilities and sort of the leadership matrix matters a lot. And it's interesting to me. I've seen it work and I've seen it not work, where companies recognize this problem. They recognize that marketing and sales are in silos. And so they hire a chief revenue officer, a CRO, and they basically layer on the CRO to the existing corporate structure. Mm-hmm. And they have a RevOps team that tries to, and again, sometimes successfully and sometimes not successfully, align metrics and incentives across marketing and sales and success or service. And the reason I think it works is the personalities of the people who are currently the CSO and the CMO are willing to work with a chief revenue officer. And the what I see in the companies that doesn't work as much is not just that there are personalities or there's more territory fighting between marketing and sales. I also think that the CRO may not be empowered enough to make those sorts of decisions and to set those sorts of metrics and hold teams accountable to those decisions. Honestly, if I could burn it to the ground and rebuild it, I do think a CRO is a very interesting position to start with. And the problem that I see it out in the marketplace in looking at books and white papers sort of preparing for today's conversation is a lot of the existing solutions is a layered on approach. Basically, it's saying we have a 3-tiered cake, so we're going to add a 4th tier. And then we're going to re-ice it. Okay, we're going to shave off the top layer of icing
on that first layer. That's the biggest problem, right?
And that is to me, I think, the problem in which you can add all of the marketing ops, rev ops, sales ops, whatever people in the world, and you can align them in even one revenue entity. But if you're
sales dev,
sales dev ops, I think I've seen a position for that as well. And I don't know why, honestly, but I think it is a testament to this idea that companies are struggling with this. They're recognizing they're struggling with it, and they just don't know what to do about it. And so their solution, which is not a horrible solution, it's just a misaligned one, is to add another layer on the layer cake. And that's an ops team or a rev team or some sort of blended positions, or you have people sitting in each of the teams and then each of those people sit on another team together. And I guess, but at a fundamental level, my question is, talking with businesses that I work with and talking with clients that I work with is, how are you generating revenue? And if you can't answer from nobody knows about our brand to they're a loyal customer, and you can map out how your business handles each part of that process, it's going to be really hard to have a rev team, an ops team, or anything like that work really well. And the challenge of that question, how are you generating revenue, is most business leaders say, well, it's happening. We are generating revenue, but we don't really know how. And this comes back to that strategic and thoughtful decision making and being aware. I saw a comment earlier of best practices means you're already too late to the game. Marketing should help you think outside of the box. Thank you for this question or this comment. I think you're dead on. I think the more that marketing leaders have a focus on the entire life cycle, thinking about from nobody knows about our company all the way to they're a loyal customer, and also sales thinks about nobody knows about our company all the way to they're a loyal customer, and success thinks about nobody knows about our company all the way to a loyal customer. I'll say it again for effect if you want. That is, to me, the crucial alignment, because now it provokes a question of, how are people finding out about our company? And attribution software, well documented, it's not great. People can be searching your company, but actually they're getting word of mouth referrals. So self-attribution can help with that. But that's a foundational step in just good data practices. So the more that you can understand how the front end of this process works, of the customer journey, and marketing can help fuel that from a demand generation playbook, getting your name out into the world, getting attention. And your sales team, to your point, can also help with that, especially with virtual selling tools like LinkedIn and content creation playbooks in there. Suddenly, what is marketing and sales doesn't matter as much. It's more about, what is the customer journey? How are people interacting with our brands from the very beginning until they're loyal customers? And the more that leadership emphasizes aligned metrics across those teams, in which now marketing is not aligned necessarily on just handing off to sales, but marketing is supporting sales, saying, what do you need in your parts of the life cycle? Because it's not sequential either. There might be some stuff in the middle about retention and growth that both marketing and sales handle. I know this happens all the time. Marketing sends stuff to existing customers and account executives follow up with existing clients. Like there's all of this blend together. So the more that you have this, let's call it a customer journey map as a foundational strategy document, and you understand each step of the process and how everybody's working together, now you can set up metrics. The layer that you can add across that foundational layer is all of the tactics and the strategies that work today in our competitive landscape that didn't work 10 years ago, or maybe they did work 10 years ago, and the stuff 10 years ago that we're still using today no longer works. And now you get to have the assessment of saying, okay, how do we create awareness out in the marketplace? Because it used to be we would do these 3 things. Nowadays, we have to do these 5 things. And that's that second layer of hiring and building a marketing team that supports those tactics and strategies, but from a foundational level of asking, what is the customer journey? And how do they interact with our entire organization?
I got Morgan fired up here.
I'm fired up.
So, Morgan, how do we incentivize companies to be more patient? Because this is where I see everything fall apart. I love this idea. Let's run it forward. We get 3 weeks in. You're like, okay, show me what you've accomplished.
Yep.
And short-term cash flow will always be a killer. If you're not consistent month to month, you'll see that it can be really tough because everything will always be derailed. But how do you set metrics? Talking about rebuilding the marketing company, how do you reset the metrics that incentivize patience? Where should companies be looking?
Great question, and one I only have a partial answer to. I think that I don't want to just like turn the question on you, but I feel like there's a crucial dimension that I want you to answer as well, which is in the first 90 days of a go-to-market strategy. And let's say you have, I don't know, 3 salespeople and a marketer, 4 salespeople and a marketer. That's the usual mix. Do you find that short-term cash flow is primarily thrust upon sales and not marketing? And do you think in an ideal world that it still remains sales' responsibility to generate short-term cash flow? Or how do you think about that?
Great question. I think that most companies don't look at it like an investment portfolio. And the problem is they never reallocate after it starts to work. And so the whole point of this is there's no reallocation after you get traction. And so what should happen is there should be like an 80-20. 80% should go to short term and then 20% to long term. And then once you hit certain thresholds, you should reallocate your budget to programs and people that work with that different strategy and that mindset. But there's never a reallocation because they just stick with that survival mode. And the problem is that kills your cost of acquisition, that kills your longevity. I've seen a lot of customers that leave companies because they don't do a land and expand model. Once they go and purchase, they are essentially forgotten until they try to quit. But this is all comes down to allocating your resources and investing in the right things. And so if you don't have customers, how the hell do you go and invest into retention programs?
Right. And
and then they don't usually invest in it until retention's a problem. And they're going, well, we better go and hire, some specialist to come here and figure out how to go and do retention.
Okay. That's really interesting because the way I was going to begin to answer your question was sort of like driving a car where you may, especially stick shift, if you begin and you're at a stoplight and the light turns green, you're going to be in first gear for some amount of time. And then you shift into second gear. And then you shift into third gear and eventually maybe fourth gear. And I think that as an analogy, to me is patience is some dedication to the metrics at first, second, third, and fourth gear being the same. You're trying to hit revenue goals. You're trying to hit, let's say some vanity stuff like follower counts and visibility in the marketplace and inbound, outbound ratios, pipeline velocity, all the rest of it. All of that's important to have across each of your first, second, and third and fourth gears. But I find the reason that companies don't scale well is that they think what served them well, to your point, in sort of a different analogy, while driving in first gear also serves them well in second gear. And
Yep.
I think the what happens is when a company rolls out a demand gen playbook when they're in second gear and they want to reach to third gear, the mistake they make is still using the same metrics they used in first gear to measure how effective it is in second gear. And that's where it's some things I think have to remain the same. Like there's some top level revenue metrics, and if you have like a recurring revenue model, MRR is very important. I think pipeline velocity is an interesting way to sort of summarize how well your deal flow is happening. I think there's other things, more granular things marketing and sales teams can look at depending upon the company and the industry. But sometimes what I believed, at least, is that in first gear, your sales development motion is going to be probably really fast and really sales heavy, and marketing is only starting to really do its work. And then in second gear, marketing is going to be able to start ramping up more, especially from a demand gen playbook. But demand generation takes a bunch of time to pay off. And so if you're still thinking of what's our short-term cash flow position as you invest in these things that really pay off when you shift into third gear, then you're going to shoot yourself in the foot and you're going to shut down the stuff. So to me, I don't think it's patience in leadership when it comes to marketing investment is not patience in faith or belief that these things will pay off. It still requires strategic thought. It is more a recognition that at different stages in your life cycle, you need different things. And the time in which you get a return on your investment extends the longer and longer you go. And that's because also, to take another concept that's been popularized, like brand equity. Brand equity as a concept is that you, like Apple, have both visibility in the marketplace and trust as a result in your brand or your business, and that people know who you are. And brand equity is not that hard to damage. It's very difficult to build. And in the long haul, the stuff you're doing from the very get-go fuels your brand equity. But the more intentional you get around your brand equity in the marketplace, the longer it's going to take to pay off. It's that marketing, sales, and success alignment to make sure that people have great experiences through the entire buying experience with you, as well as retention and growth. All of that sort of fuels your long-term growth. But to me, that's not a matter of patience necessarily. It's more just understanding that the timeline for payoff on brand equity is very different than the timeline for payoff on a 90-day go-to-market strategy with a really heavy sales development motion. Like strategically, just the metrics are different, and it requires just the willingness to understand as you shift gear, your levels of investment and the times to ROI are a little bit different, or can be, right? So it's a dance, maybe. It could be another analogy.
I love the shifting gears.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll for a couple reasons, because when you're watching different things in different gears, there's also different times in different gears. I drive a standard.
Okay.
I spend very little time in first.
Mm-hmm.
Second's probably my most used gear. It's my most versatile gear too. And if suddenly you jump down to one by accident, you're going to be jerking around. It's a big surprise. So you never want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But also there's signs and symptoms, your tax going into the red line, that you should have shifted already. But what do you hear companies normally talk about? I'm a startup or I'm a mature company. There's no other gears.
Mm-hmm.
So companies are doing a disservice, and maybe banking, you can throw a few other things in there because they don't actually grade you on this. They don't have different gears for you to go and identify with. And it would be very interesting to do a visual of this, Morgan, where you have like a transparency on a photo. And at the different stages, it becomes less and less transparent until it's crystal clear because you know your customer.
Right.
And there might be more than one. But the problem is we never look at what do we actually know. So they can't shift gears into marketing because the knowledge from sales isn't being shared. And it's always an assumed knowledge base versus that A/B testing, which comes from communication, becomes from me talking to you, Morgan, and saying, yeah, that strategy we had about this is what they wanted. They didn't buy it. They hated it, but they were actually really interested in this. And this is the words that they use. And now we have Zoom recordings. We can go and pull out transcripts, we have Gong, we have all these different tools.
Mm-hmm.
We need to go and have those ability to go and take that so that we can navigate those gears with ease. But we also have to have metrics set up to know when we hit those milestones to reallocate the spending and gear up into the next stage. And maybe that's what we just need to see more in the market. So I love that. You definitely need to quote that and throw that out somewhere.
I will use that analogy again. I also think, to your point though, as that picture gets more transparent, or as you shift into higher gear, or however this analogy plays out, as you rebalance your investment portfolio, your hiring decisions also change.
Yes.
And this is, to me, it's really interesting. In the early 90-day sales development motion, go to market, etc. This is probably going to get me in hot water.
Uh-oh.
Generating MQLs is not the worst decision of your life. Is it great? No, right? But at an early level, and maybe sales even can handle all of the MQL generation. Like, this is where even a marketer doesn't have to be involved in this. But in your early term sales development motion, and I feel like this gets lost a lot in the demand gen playbook. People still have to make money as they go to market. Your sales motion is going to optimize for just people who are interested, people who are aware, people who you can get your attention of. And that's okay. That's first gear. And as you shift into gear, the kinds of marketers or the kinds of salespeople, sales strategists, sales managers that you're going to hire are going to change. And
it'll evolve.
And it will evolve. And that's at a fundamental level what was interesting about the story we kicked this all off in, which is their sales development motion was successful. So now marketing can do an investment in demand generation and can do an investment in the customer life cycle. I
actually agree with you. Yeah. Because but think about it from like a very like foundational standpoint. What is the salesperson's greatest frustration? Who the hell do I call? And so when you have MQLs, if you're actually using the right mindset to go and filter through those MQLs to see what's working and what's not, it'll paint a picture on who you should be talking to, which you can then build your account list with. Going back to last week's conversation of how to build that list.
And there are so many ways that you can get stuck in gear. And then you are supposed to be in second gear, but you're still optimizing for all of this early term motion. And oh my gosh, we know so much more about our customers, but we're still generating MQLs. And like, that's where obviously that goes awry. And again, I think that a potential modern organization, actually MQL generation, whatever that means, is actually just SQLs. It's just the sales team handling the outbound motion. And your marketing team isn't even a thing yet, or is mostly equipped with just general like brand information, and they're helping out with collateral to the sales team. Like it's pretty low key, and you don't have a demand gen investment yet. I think as you grow and you shift gears or you rebalance your portfolio, the things that marketing is going to do is obviously geared towards the long run, but it is hedged entirely on the fact that you have cash flow, that you can stay in business, and that you can support your existing margin. And that over time, you can drive down your cost of acquisition, which is obviously marketing's goal and sales goal, of course.
But and that's never usually hear about that either.
And that's where demand gen helps, of course.
Yeah.
And that's where hiring marketing generals or generalists, people who are not incredibly specialized in one technique, allows you, as you shift into second gear, to really optimize your existing marketing infrastructure and begin to invest in demand generation between outsourcing to the right sorts of contractors or hiring internally for some sort of content creator. And as you shift into third gear, those efforts are paying off and you're seeing movement, especially inbound movement from your marketing. But at a really early term, companies that are struggling with cash flow, I think, hear the end of the MQL and they go, okay, well, we need to invest in demand gen. And to your point, the reason that leaders become impatient about that is because there isn't a payoff immediately. And so if a company is struggling with cash flow, but investing in demand generation and there's not a payoff, well, you're really screwed, man. I'm just going to be honest with you. If you don't have the other pieces working together. And of course, it's a dance. This is an imperfect question. And there's not like 100% right answer all of the time. But
think of funding too. Think of like how the company's funded and how they're being scored based on those funding metrics.
That's a whole question.
But I was thinking of your analogy of shifting gears. What happens is you get funded and then somebody slams you down a gear and you're still revving at the same speed and you're, going, holy crap, because nobody gave you warning that now they were judging you based on second gear or first gear where you were cruising perfectly in third, anticipating to actually go up to fourth. And so you got to be very careful too, as you're expanding your programs and you're seeking external funding, that you have really good metrics that show progress other than the conventional benchmarks, because those benchmarks may shift you back into a gear that is no longer relevant at your stage of business.
Right. And I genuinely think that it's not like this isn't a silver bullet either. But like in the early term, you're doing whatever you need to generate cash. If you're a startup, you're less than 10 employees, whatever, you are literally just either trying to get funding or revenue. You're in survival mode. And that's first gear. And whatever you're doing there to get customers and understand them.
It's guerrilla warfare, ladies and gentlemen.
Like,
just
sure.
Make it happen.
Whatever. But as you grow and you're shifting through different gears, the metrics that you should be using should change, of course. But that's a testament to the fact that you have revenue or profit, really, that allow you to invest in those long-term things. And that's where, if you're a larger company, you have more than 50 people, you have consistent MRR or whatever else, then you should be investing in demand gen like 2 years ago. Like that's a no-brainer. But if you're smaller and you're still growing and you're still going through the life cycles and you're like still trying to figure out some stuff, in my view, it's okay. Like, the sales development motion is a sales development motion. You just need to generate revenue. And like a stock and bonds portfolio for somebody young, a young company could still invest 20% in a marketing effort that has long-term payoffs if they're able to. I think that's very wise. But you need to be able to hire people who are not just specialized in, I run a bunch of emails and email automation and email content creation in order to make that happen. Like there's a more strategic approach to hiring and building and incentivizing the marketing team to hit these targets together across the revenue organization.
Yeah. You know what levers there are, then invest in specialists. Maybe you start with a contractor, but to support modern B2B sales, it needs to generate modern B2B sales. And as you go through the gears, you need to reallocate, you need to go in, and that might be changing titles, that might be changing responsibilities. And I think you should. And I think you'll see the biggest thing, if you're sitting here wondering where the hell do I stand, I was thinking of some of the things that I judge companies on, and I asked them, what is their lead mix? And on the surface level, I don't dig into like intent. I'll usually just look at how much is outbound and how much is inbound driven. If once you get to 50-50, you move out of survival mode and life gets a lot easier if you don't let up on the outbound. As soon as you get to about 60-70%, this is when you're really shifting gears and building up momentum, and it's hard to be stopped. But that's only if you start changing your investment to keep pushing that inbound motion and changing the way you do your outbound so that it's more like a sniper versus the original guerrilla machine gun, like just attack anything that comes close. Because
do you want my product?
It's like, it makes me think of those commercials. The guy goes up on the man lift and it's like, do you have a moment to, I always forget what it is. I don't know why I can never think of what it is, but you always correct me. You have a moment to go and talk about your car's extended warranty?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it is that.
Oh, I got it right?
Yeah. It's so true though. And that's where
do you have a moment to talk about your car's extended warranty?
But honestly, I think what you're hitting on is that I don't want to say it's laziness, but I think that leaders, once they have a comfortable revenue engine, are like, oh yeah, whatever. At least we're generating revenue. And are we still hitting those metrics that we hit, last week or last month or last quarter or last year? And once, that has been proven, we're generating revenue like this, then it's like, we'll just continue to generate revenue like that. Let's just stay in second gear. We don't need to shift to third gear.
I'm going to get myself in trouble for this.
Oh no.
How long has leadership been in a leadership position? And if you guys want to throw in the comments how you feel about this, please do. I would more than happy to take a meeting to dive into this. But so if your best practices when you were a top performer 10, 15, 20 years ago, and all you know is that, how hard is it for you to see anything else?
Yeah, it's that bias of, oh, well, this worked when I see, I mean, I definitely have
I'm a
learned.
culprit of this.
I'm a culprit of this as well.
Yeah.
Oh, this is how it worked in 2010. Doesn't it still work this way? And oh, no, it doesn't. Okay.
But think of the bias that we build as we move up into leadership, and as we're experiencing different stages, we're just gonna reflect on what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, actually, what I'm learning as we go, because there's no concrete communication channels, I think that leadership stops learning to a certain degree, and mid management is probably the buffer that is probably the most educated of everyone, because they're kind of stuck in between the middle and they're seeing what's working and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where it stops. And then leadership's focus on the future value, but the future value isn't tying to the day to day.
Yeah.
So I think we just stumbled upon a bigger conversation that we need to continue for another day.
Definitely.
But thank you, Morgan. I really loved that car analogy. I'm definitely we're gonna have to run with for a while. Did you have any final comments or?
No, I think the only last thing I'd like to say is thanks to everyone for listening. I hope that you found value in this conversation. And I think this is a really emergent topic for companies that I see everywhere. Who do we hire? How do we hire? And fundamentally, it comes back to what's your business strategy and how are you dealing with your growth cycles and your growth engines? And I'm excited to continue to talk about this in the future, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, everyone. Make sure if you're not already, you follow us. And please, if you have any questions or comments that'll help us get better, we would love to hear them. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Bye.